Thank you, Sports Planet, for having us here. And thank you, Shruti and Rishi, for getting me on board. So we are going to discuss about integrating wearables for peak performance in elite sports. So when we talk about wearable technology, there are layers to it. We got different types of technology. We got watches, we got rings now, we got necklaces, all sorts of ornaments going on. And then we have these gyroscopes. We have got transducers. We got something called as exoskeletons, which have microweights inside them, which help the athletes with like potentiation of the neuromuscular system. So we're just gonna have like wonderful insights from our panel of experts around here, which brings me to the first question, and I would want to start with Dr. Anup. So what do you think when we talk about wearable technology? Uh, in terms of the future in this country, have we scratched the surface yet? And when I say that, I have got two questions built in within the question itself. What does the future hold in India for wearable technology in terms of A, performance enhancement of the athletes, and B, in terms of procuring data for research and development?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Sports Planet, for the opportunity. Yeah, so to answer your question, uh, what is the use or where do wearables stand in the Indian context? Now, number one, if I have an athlete, I want to know few parameters for him. So I use the wearable. It gives me workload. It gives me several physiological parameters. What is he doing? It gives me total workload. It gives me what is the load on the athlete. It tells me what is the recovery status of the athlete, right? And it tells me all this in real time. If I have a sweat patch on the athlete, it will give me what is the rate of sweat rate. It will give me what is the composition of the sweat. So I can tailor make replenishment strategies for him. Yeah, that's. We can also, there's a very important component in sports called sports concussion. Now, this is an entity which cannot be diagnosed. It's very, very difficult to diagnose. But if you have a patch on the skull which quantifies the amount of force which has hit the skull, if it is beyond a particular threshold, so I know that this guy has most possibly suffered a sports concussion. So yes, we have not even scratched the surface as far as India is concerned. We are very happy with our smartwatches and our rings and blah blah blah. But there are so many areas where we can use wearables. Right? The future, we are looking at wearable clothing. Right? So people are coming up with clothing with sensors in it. And there are different types of sensors, accelerometers, gyroscopes, sweat rate patches. It also looks at your muscle activations. So your EMG is obsolete now. During your sport, during your activity, it is looking at muscle activation. So this is the future, and we have to, get in touch with it.
Dr. Tvisha, would you want to add to this with your insight as a clinician and as a practitioner? Because I would want to get more out of the panel right now.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Sports Planet. So I think what I'd like to add to this is that these technologies are available, but when research is done on these, it's found that there are some issues not for India but worldwide, which coaches even in the more sports scientifically developed countries have said, is that the accuracy of the devices suffers. Now we have lab-based stuff, and then there is this wearable technology. So the complaint with the lab-based stuff for decades has been that it does not replicate the on-field situation. So when we do a biomechanics testing for somebody in the lab, they're like, it's not on-field. So that's how we came up with wearable things that it could be used on-field. But now we're going to step ahead that it's wearable. It's not just on-field. But the thing is that the lab-based technology did not replicate the on-field situation. But the problem with the on-field technology at the moment is the accuracy. And that's where it suffers a lot. That, people have the data, but it's probably inaccurate is what the coaches and the support staff feel. Whatever said and done, how much ever nice the companies are making it, the athlete is aware that he is being monitored. So if they are doing a wearable, if you're just shooting an athlete like it's been happening, 2D, 3D analysis, no, 2D video analysis has been happening for, years for just, looking at the biomechanics aspect. The athlete is not so cognizant of being videoed. But if they have, like I said, they've made very nice patches now. Companies are making, it's very little, they don't really get disturbed. But still, athletes are conscious about being monitored.
Forget the athlete part. How do we educate the coaches first and make them more welcoming towards these kind of devices and this kind of technology? So, and how do we make them understand that we are trying to help? We are not trying to add, because Dr. Tvisha mentioned about sometimes wearing a device can worsen the situation, because now it's like you're under the scanner 24/7, and you have all these questionnaires also going on, and I'm pretty sure people who work here with athletes, we all know that some of them rarely sleep for 8 hours, 10 hours. हाँ, questionnaire fill करके बोल देंगे हम लोग 8 घंटा सोए, RP हमारा 2 है, but you will find the lights are on और Netflix चल रहा है. This like real world scenario. So how do we kind of counter this as professionals, and how do we make them accept the technology part of it, so that the environment becomes a little more stable and it becomes a little more friendly for the athletes also to welcome and accept this kind of technology?
So I think if you not show too much, it's sometimes better, because you will end up showing too much. This is that, this is that, this is that, where they just expect you to have that minute changes, like the seconds of changes can win someone a gold medal or a silver medal. So whenever you try and do too much of it, it complicates things. And especially when you're talking to coaches, yes, we have interiors where they don't know anything. They struggle to use. These days smartphones are, I think, so the biggest variable which anyone has. And when you tell coaches, we are not going to take your position. We're just trying to help a little bit of it. We'll maybe, help you 1% of what you're doing. That is where the buy-in comes in from, not to take the position. Then you get the buy-in and the player listens to you. You let them do things and you try and make 1% of the change every single day. That's how the buy-in comes in.
That reminded me of another thing I would like to share here. So I was traveling with my kabaddi team, and Diwali vacations were on. So our team management decided to gift us, and they gifted us a smartwatch, all of us. And I remember that very night, the entire team was in my room and the manager's room. Bhai, ye start kaise karna hai? And I'm again not taking a dig at them, but they are so humble and they are so nice at their heart. They seriously don't know all this. और हम उनको ये जाके बताएंगे कि भाई तू ये करेगा तो तेरा हार्ट रेट ऐसे दिखाएगा, तू zone 3 में काम कर रहा है, तू zone 4 में काम कर रहा है, and they are zoned out by that time. Because they don't want to listen to you. Because all their life what they have done is, भाई हम 300 दंड 500 दंड मारने वाले लोग हैं, तू हमको आके हार्ट रेट बता रहा है. And I am someone who has worked in the trenches. So if you cannot do something for yourself, you cannot, it's like buying your own product. अगर आप उसको नहीं खरीद पाओगे, तो आप उसको बेच नहीं पाओगे. So I think she made a very good point here by saying कि ज़्यादा details भी ना हम, and I am guilty of this as a strength and conditioning coach. I have done that a lot of times, because हमें भी हमारा worth prove करना है कहीं तो team में. For them it's like gym trainer. ये आके सिर्फ वजन उठवाता है, करा तो कुछ है नहीं. But when you're trying to prove your worth, you want data with it. वरना आप कैसे बताओगे कि ये changes आ रहे हैं उसमें? हाँ, weight on the bar is one thing. अगर आप exercise करोगे 6 महीना तो weight on the bar बढ़ना ही है. Because that's progressive overload. That's very simple kind of methodology that athletes, general population follows. So very good point. Thank you for that. Thank you for bringing this out in front of everyone, because I think the practicality in using wearable technology is still pretty much missing. Which again, the next question is, I would like to ask Dr. Anup, since he also has a beautiful facility at DY Patil. I'm pretty sure you are using wearable technology, wearable devices, and you've been through different tiers and different levels of devices and using them. May I know what are some of the devices that you would personally want to use as a sports medicine professional? Like you would want all of them to take an experience of that device, and you would want all of them to sort of go back and tell their athletes or their coaches to, try and test that or those devices.
All right. Fine. So during training, I would like to know what is the load on the athlete. During training, I would like to know what is the heart rate variability and how is his sleep. If these three parameters, I give them a wearable, I get the data on the cloud. So earlier it used to be that if I want to measure something on an athlete, either I have to go through the athlete or the athlete has to come. With wearable, I can sit anywhere, I can get the data. So these three parameters very important. If he is an endurance athlete, I would like to know what is his heart rate during the race and what is his lactate profile. There is a wearable which measures your blood lactate also. So if I get that during the race, that's very good. During the race, I would like to know what is the sweat rate and what is the composition of the electrolytes of the sweat, so that I can tailor his rehydration to him. Next, a hydration station, I can tell them, isko ye itna electrolyte de do, itna sugar de do. You can tailor made, right? More importantly, now there are wearables which are improving performance, and one of the devices is called a wrist cooling device, right? So, which we were the first to test it in Army Sports Institute. There's also a scientific paper on that. So wrist cooling has found to be very, very good to improve performance in anaerobic athletes. Less in aerobic athletes, but more in anaerobic athletes. And it helps to hasten the recovery, right? So now wearables have gotten into this field also, performance enhancement, right? So yes, there are so many devices which are available. You have to use the data smartly. Don't let the device dictate what you want to do. You dictate what parameters you want to check and ask the device to give you those. So that will save a lot of your time and it will avoid this data overload which is happening.
Thank you so much, doctor. So he was talking about data and the procurement of data, and he made a very interesting point is don't let the device dictate, which is sort of a build up to my next question, is because we tend to micromanage things. As when technology sets in, we like to micromanage because the more the better. She just made a point as a coach, nahi karna chahiye zyada. He just made a point as a sports medicine doctor, nahi karna chahiye zyada. So the question is, and Dr. Tvisha, you can take this question for me. Thank you. How do we sort of make sure that we are, by using this tech, we are not micromanaging athletes and we are not taking the athleticism out of them? Because like contact sports ho gaye, collision sports ho gaye, cricket ho gaya. What happens is when you are trying to feed in data, and you also mentioned some time back about it, the more you do it, the more it sort of weakens you from the inside, because now you are constantly under the scanner, and now all you want to do is just be good to the device, because you want the readings to be good. So it's sort of like what I call like a Pygmalion effect, right? The more you tell people that you're good, the more they start acting better for some reason, right? Even if they're worse. And not necessarily that would make them a champion athlete. It would obviously enhance some level of athleticism in them, but will it get us medals is the question. And the second question is, how do we sort of take ourselves back as sports medicine professionals and stop micromanaging these athletes using wearable tech, so that there is a balance that is there between the tech and the raw athleticism that needs to be there?
Super difficult, at least for me. So I would start from one of the things you mentioned. At the end of the day, what matters to the athlete, to the coach, to everybody is medals, winning. As sports medicine physicians, what definitely matters to us in addition to all of that is the health of the athlete. We don't want the health of the athlete getting compromised way too much at the expense of the medal. And that's where we are stressing on sleep a lot, because we heard in the previous talk by previous panel that sleep is very important. So if the athlete is already happy with the performance, then we really have to have a discussion whether the micromanagement and the intervention is necessary. We can always say, you are here, we will get you there. And that's where the technology will be required, because it's, now your coaching is perfect, your nutrition is perfect, this is perfect, but now how are you going to get that bit edge? That's where, all the technology will be required. But honestly, we've practically used this with a lot of our elite athletes, and the number of things we ask them to fill, like the questionnaires, the RPs, the sleep, so that's where the technology comes in, we'll get the data automatically. But I think so my approach is target-based. So, if, yes, workload is definitely important. So yes, in a team sport where I'm looking at workload, where I know that the workload has an impact on injuries, yes, I will look at the workload. And that's where I will micromanage that closely. CGM, which is the commonest one, the glucose monitor, how do you utilize it? If I'm looking at my archer who is overweight and who thinks कि नहीं मैं तो कुछ खाती नहीं हूँ पता नहीं क्या हो गया, and no, and if I feel like she's having a borderline diabetes, something is off, then I will put her on a CGM to find out कि देखो बेटा ये जो तुम्हारा घी भी है उससे भी हो रहा है, something is happening, although it doesn't have the carbs, there is, so the CGM will then show the values, because then we have a problem, then we are giving them a solution. That performance aspect, when we, which is the ideal place where you would want to use all these wearables, to show that effect, I think we have to use the technology quietly, like Tanuja said, on the back end for 1 year minimum. Then go and tell the support staff कि देखो हम ये सब back end पे कर रहे थे, and now our medals have increased or our timings have gone down by point whatever, so many seconds, etc. So that quick thing, I think definitely will not work, because they'll be like there's too much happening, and it's only to get the buy-in is very important. So also assessing who is the staff in front of you. Like you said, if it's somebody who is very resistant, the coaches are resistant, I don't think it would make too much sense to break our heads also in front of them, because the resistance will be too much. Like I said, we do something, show them the results. Results is what matters. And we are also doing it for results. So results is what matters. So it'll be a slow process from that point of view. And from that point of view, going back to the first question to Dr. Anup Krishnan, I think it's going to be a few years that all of this will come into place, where the technology is also good, the staff is good to accept it, the staff is good to interpret it, and everything works together.
Thank you so much. Another interesting point, you mentioned nutrition. We got some great nutritionists watching us right now here, listening to us right now. And I'm just adding one more question to you, coach, is because we have this coach fist bump thing happening over here. We've been working in sport, and you know how important nutrition becomes for an athlete. And I think I sinned a bit when I mentioned to one of the nutritionists outside that I have a raider in my team who's a top raider in the league right now, and he starts his breakfast with gulab jamun. Facts. He eats 3 gulab jamuns, and every time I try to give him some gyan on nutrition, he's like, "Sir, हमारी engine तो इससे ही चालू हो गए." That's the answer. Whether it's right or wrong, I can play the devil's advocate here. But he's been doing it for years. बचपन से यही खाता आ रहा हूँ. Where does wearable technology fall in here, and how do we sort of make sure that their nutrition, because there are teams which do not have a nutritionist, and I think they should, for all the right reasons, but budget constraints, या और कुछ, या आप ही करा लो, है ना? Sometimes, as an SNC coach, I have to be the father, I have to be the mother, I have to be the daughter, I have to be the son, I have to be everything for them, right? Sometimes I don't have to be, depending on the team budget. So, worst case scenario, if we have to have the nutrition on point, what's the role of wearable technology in that?
I think with wearable technology, I don't see nutrition being there. It comes where you log in stuff or you take a snap of the meal. That's where, the input comes in. This meal has A, B, C, D things in it, like carbs, protein, fats, whatever it is. So the least what you can do, the least minimum or the cheapest out of everything. No offense to the nutrition programs or anything like that, but for, let's say, very raw athletes or people who cannot afford a nutritionist. In few of the panel discussions we saw that, not everyone is able to afford everything. You can download an app, you can at least log in the food, because nowadays there are apps which have Indian foods in them. It can at least, be a thing where, you're aware about how much calories you're taking in, how much fats are there, how much proteins you say. We say that for recovery, protein is the most important thing, right? So then, are you taking that much amount of protein? So at least an athlete can log in the meals and he can see that, this is what my diet looks like, this is what I'm eating. When they go to a nutritionist, dietitianist, they can show that data, then they can have an interaction and it can be taken forward from there. So that's the cheapest thing what can be done. But like I said, it's very subjective. People from north will like their parathas, people from south will like their dosas, and it goes on like that, because we have various cultures and we have a lot of variety in India.
Diverse.
So that's why it's very different for every person.
Okay, so I'll just loop in this information and I'll go straight to Dr. Rizwan, because everybody wants to know IPL ke players kya khate. So, does Virat Kohli eat sweets? Does Shubman Gill eat at all, considering how lean he is? So, let's just say you're free to open a can of worms here. We are all ears. So, wearable tech, I'm pretty sure IPL players, the cricketers, are using it. Do they ever use it for things like nutrition, sleep? And if yes, how does it help them?
So IPL players just eat whatever is available, to be honest. No, I'm kidding. The thing is, like you mentioned, slowly and surely the whole tech has come into it. And one thing about wearable tech and nutrition is the CGM device first. That's where it starts from. So a lot of athletes have now collaborated with Ultra Human and things like that, and they are monitoring themselves. Now, what I think this has helped most is changing athlete behavior. So one thing, it was telling them that if you eat this your sugar is going to spike, and one thing is when you see it on your phone, that it leads them to understand that okay, this is really happening, and not because a nutritionist is just telling me this. Similarly, the Whoop band. Now they all knew this from before, that sleep is important for recovery, nutrition is important for recovery, but in that app, you can see that if you've had bad sleep, bad nutrition, your recovery is 2%. Now that's very subjective data in your face. Ki, whatever I've done yesterday hasn't helped. So I need to sleep better. I need to eat better. So my point is that it's helped in kind of regulating, rather improving athlete behaviors. Yes, we come from a diverse country. Everyone has different food habits. But when they get this kind of biofeedback, that leads to an improvement in their behavior. Earlier, there was a time when IPL used to have parties in the night, and that was the fashion. But it doesn't happen anymore. The match gets over, and you get hit the bed because we are mostly traveling the next day. So sleep is a luxury. That is why it's very, very important that whenever they get time, IPL team invests on chartered jet, just because they can fly out at the time which they want to, and if the entire aircraft is there, the fast bowlers can lounge around, they can have the bigger seats and things like that. So all these, I think an important point made earlier, that the whole management has to be involved in that. This is how everyone contributes to that athlete recovery is primary, and it's a long tournament clubbed into a very short time. So to manage injuries, nutrition plays a part, sleep plays a part, and I only see this growing from here.
I saw someone whip out a phone immediately after I asked you about IPL. That's the amount of curiosity they have. Dr. Anup, what are your final thoughts on how we can make sure that we have affordable tech devices in the country. B, they are backed by research, because if they are not backed by research, we can have different devices in different colors, which looks great on paper, but they are useless pretty much. So how can we as sports medicine professionals, sports science professionals, help the athletes in having these wearables with them at a very affordable cost? What are your thoughts?
I'll answer the second part first. Uh, if you are selecting a device, make sure that device has been benchmarked against the gold standard for that measurement, right? And if it has been, then it is fine to select that device, right? The cost effectiveness, I will put it in another way, right? If you go to a doctor in a Western country, he or she will take your history, and there's a big form. He will take everything under the sun and tell you, get these investigations done, come back. Whatever comes positive in the investigation, that is your diagnosis. You get medicines for that, you go home. All right? In India, we are a poor nation, a poorer nation. So we do it slightly differently. We use investigations to confirm our diagnosis. We don't use investigations to get a diagnosis, right? Similarly, wearables should be used intelligently and use it to measure the parameters you want. Again, I'm telling you, right? You decide the parameter and use a device to measure those parameters. This is a more cost-effective scenario rather than one or two devices measuring everything under the sun. And obviously, when there are more number of sensors in a device, the cost will go up.
Thank you. Are we allowed to take questions?
Yes, I think the audience is very eager, so we can probably just take one or two questions.
Okay. Who will go first? Yeah, please go ahead, ma'am. You can probably give her a mic.
I assume that the only sports psychologist who was here has left, and I want to ask all the sports doctors, medicine personnel here. So currently I've just come from Sai, Delhi, where we had a course on wearable devices. The high performance director is using a lot of wearable devices, and I could see there's a lot of dependency. What sir was saying, I questioned, are we going to take all these things to Olympics? And he's also under stress कि अगर result नहीं आया तो I'm going to get kicked off. So at one point in time, as a sports psychologist, my question is that biofeedback, neurofeedback, and identifying data for relaxation, stress levels, attention, fatigue are very important for us. But to be very honest, India is not, or rather half of the world is not teaching how to interpret data. So I appeal to everyone out here, if you can help professionals like me or even the sports nutritionists, how can the doctors in India, sports medicine doctors, help us to understand how to use this data so that we can use it in our work? That is my first question. Second question is, when we say collaboration, it's here where we speak about collaboration. I don't want to take the space of the sports science team because that is not my expertise. How do I use that data in my work as a sports psychologist is what is going to be most important. And thirdly, most of the biofeedback, neurofeedback systems are placed in government setups because these are all 3 to 5 crore machineries. How can any of the hospitals or D.Y. Patil University help us as private practitioners to have more access to this kind of technology? Only then I think we can use it at the grassroots level. So that is my very, very keen interest to know how we can collaborate. Thank you very much.
I take it. All right, ma'am, are you based in Bombay?
Yes.
Please visit us. You will see a world-class sports sciences center, fully integrated with all specialists and all the assessments possible. All right. So if you want to send your athlete for any assessment, more than welcome. That's number. Please do. Right. That's number one. Number two, your biofeedback and neurofeedback mechanisms or tools are of more use in sports like archery, shooting, where focus and other things are more important. We did a study on HRV in archers. And the problem is when he's not used to wearing that device, and if he has not been trained to wear the device during training, he will certainly not use it during competition, right? So then there is a limitation. So we have to first train him, to wear it, and then maybe once you show the utility, he will use it during competition. Or he can use it for shadowing purposes. That this day, this weather condition, this mood, this score, these were the parameters on my biofeedback. So if he gets a similar condition without the device also, he knows how to tackle that. So these are the ways. I really don't think an athlete is going to allow you to use a device during his competition. That is going to be very, very difficult. So you can use it during training and train the athlete to cope with coping strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Anup. Can I take a couple of more? Yeah. Young man, coach.
Myself Omkar. I'm triathlete and endurance coach. So basically, these integrating wearables, all like Garmin devices and all, we use it often because we do coaching remotely also. So it's very useful. Like suppose if runner is there, then at what pace he is running, or what is his cadence, or vertical oscillation, or ground contact time. Many variables I can get from that, and I can analyze the data and give him feedback. So because I can't see everyone while running, or I can't run with him if I have a lot of athletes. So that data helps me for running. Same like cycling, even swimming also, what stroke rate is having and all. So all the aspects we get covered from it. So that is really good if we see. But totally depending on variables is also not option. Like if we see, for example, marathon record. Right now, Indian marathon record is 2 hours 12 minutes, which was in like 1978 by Shivnath Singh, which is still not broken. At that time, he even hadn't shoes as well for running. He did barefoot. But today, with carbon plated shoes or wearables, or we have all the high tech technology, but still we are not able to break it. So coaches also need to understand this point, that what to get from data and how to work on it, and how to give the feedback to the athletes and all. So these points are also important. So that was also.
So you have a question?
No.
Okay. Thank you so much for the insight. Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi. Good evening, I'm Shweta Bhatia. I'm a registered dietitian. My question is to Dr. Krishnan. You mentioned something about a sweat patch. So is there any specific brand, or are these being used in India? Because, it really helps us nutritionists understand the sweat rate instead of doing a calculation and an estimate.
Yes, ma'am. It's the patch is available, and because the company doesn't pay me, I'm not going to tell you the name. But yes, the patch is available, and it gives a lot of data. The patch connects to an app on your phone, so the data, the patch is only used for the measurement, and the app gives you the data.
And is that working pretty accurately, like from whatever
Yes,
you
ma'am.
gauge?
Yes. I mean, otherwise you're blind.
Right.
All right. It is giving you some data, and you can tailor make so many strategies based on that. How accurate it is, I don't think it has been benchmarked against the gold standard, but it is something is better than nothing.
Also, is there anybody else? Can I just take one more question? To the SNCs, basically, you mentioned about, that some of the athletes, they can afford the world's gadgets. So I have had a few athletes who wear a Garmin, but they don't know how to track a single parameter from that. In fact, even the SNCs couldn't help them out with the tracking. So finally, they started asking me, because I do a lot of talking with the SNCs to integrate their nutrition and training programs. So they understood that I might have some knowledge on the watch, and they started asking me questions on the parameters that they should monitor. So one thing is that, if there is a good gadget available, I think you all can do a small orientation for the athletes also to track their own things while they train, when it's not a group activity, for example, they're training on their own or they're off season. Maybe a small orientation can be done amongst athletes who have these gadgets so that they can track for themselves. So that's one thing. And second thing about the Whoop, as you rightly said, ma'am, that, we need to go by the athlete's feedback. Because one of the athletes came back to me saying that, hey, listen, my output is 3,500 calories a day. And, the athlete required to lose some body fat because the DEXA was showing over the mark. And I told him that I've planned 2,500 calories for you already, and you still haven't started losing any body fat yet. So don't take that as an absolute value, because a 3,500 is pretty inaccurate in that sense. So I feel like we have to correlate with how they feel, their feedback. Like even if their sleep is not to the mark, but on the gadget, but they're saying that they've recovered well and they're feeling good the next day. I think we really need to correlate with the athlete's feedback and the data.
Thank you so much. I think. Sure, sure, sir.
Ma'am, you mentioned about, even Dr. Rizwan also mentioned about CGM. As we doctors and probably the nutritionists are well aware of CGM, it's basically continuous glucose monitoring, which nowadays we use for diabetes, but we use it in sports. I've started using it a year back, not in fact for my patients, because it's a little bit expensive, but elite athletes can afford it. So can you just elaborate to the house, like one is the cost, and the other is that gulab jamun issue could probably, you can use a CGM on that athlete. How would you use that and integrate it with his, maybe his Garmin or his watch? I'm sure he can afford a Garmin, your IPL player. So ma'am, maybe that could also help us understand.
You're welcome to join the team.
Sure. So basically, the CGM is continuous glucose monitoring. So there is a device which goes into the body. There's a small needle with which it pricks what we call the interstitial fluid. I think everybody is medical or paramedical here. So it's not in the blood vessel, it's in the interstitial fluid. So first thing, the values are not exactly the same as your blood glucose, but they are a near mirror of that. So it's not exactly the same. So the good thing is always that once the person gets a CGM patch, at the same time roughly they should get a blood glucose check done. It can be either with a finger prick or it can be a formal lab test. And you should just on day 1 or 2 establish what is the, maybe not the day 1, but maybe the day 2, establish how much is the difference between the actual lab value or the blood value, which is the blood value, yeah, and the interstitial value, first thing. The CGM which is the most popular currently in India is something which lasts for 14 days. Again, I'm not going to take the brand name because, yeah, like exactly like sir mentioned. Having said that, I put it on myself pretty much throughout the year for various reasons. So it is, I would say, extremely close to very accurate in tracking everything. The moment I eat a pizza, it will go up. You can see the sugars going up. Gulab jamun is a little bit dicey because the way the blood sugars work is if you have fat along with sugar, it is a slow rise. So that's a little tricky. But typically in our Indian scenario, it's excellent because we are a carb nation. So, you know, our poha, upma, idli, all of that, we can see what happens with that when it's taken standalone. And that is, I think, a big eye-opener for, like I said, our athletes who think they are doing well. I see a lot of female athletes with PCOS, and you know, they are athletes, they are working out, their body fat, I mean, they are in general, BMI is not too out of the place, but we know that in PCOS the problem is visceral fat. So having this thing shown to them that, listen, you're going into insulin resistance because your sugar is spiking. So, you know, those kind of pinpoint case scenarios, for that situation, I would definitely use the CGM. Again, I would not, it is expensive, but it's not through the roof currently. And like you said, athletes can, I mean, we use it in our system also, and athletes can roughly afford it. So the idea is you put it on for 14 days, log every single thing you've eaten so that you can see, okay, I had a millet upma and what happened. As against that, I had a rava upma, what happened the next day, the next morning, when all the other situations are similar. Also, what we can track with the CGM is how an exercise routine affects. Okay, I did an HIIT, how did my sugar behave? I did a endurance session, how did my sugar behave? I did a weightlifting session, how was the sugar? So that can give us an idea, and the idea to the nutritionist that, okay, how should I fuel this guy post particular session? So it's not that typically, you know, very often the schedule would be that post workout, this is the meal. No, but then with this extra data, post workout could be post, a post sprint workout versus a post strength workout. You know, those meals could be fairly different on the basis of this. So yeah, I think that's, does that answer what you were asking for besides the cost? Yeah. Collaborate with the other variables. Most of these come with their, either they have a standalone device, the Ultra Human has it on the app, and I know some AMS systems, athlete monitoring systems, which are incorporating it. I can't remember if the iPhone is doing that. Does anybody know? If these, does the Apple Watch or iPhone do that? I don't think it does that. iPhone does it? Okay. So usually most of these people get the app, so it's just integration with that. And the app, you have to enter your food as well as your activity. So when you do that on the app, then it becomes, yeah, but if it's integrating with the Apple Watch, then it would be useful, but I'm not fully sure if the CGM is integrated. This is the most popular brand. There are few other brands which are a little more cumbersome to apply, but they are more reliable. They are more available from the medical side, which is from the diabetes point of view that they are available in the market. So they're not fully commercially available, but one could go to a doctor and the doctor could put it on for you.
I think I just opened up a nice healthy conversation with that gulab jamun example. But any more questions? I think I can take one or two. Yes.
Sure.
Hi. So I am a nutritionist myself, and I had a few points I had a question also, and I had a sort of something to contribute about as well from the nutritionist's point of view for the wearables. So first was about the sweat patch. I had attended somebody who is an Ironman athlete, not an Indian, and also is a researcher. And he had come across that out of these sweat tests, he observed that the sodium was not actually getting out of the body, and we were not losing out on that. So why did I put this across? Because usually the sweat patches are for all the endurance athletes, and they pop on salt pills, a lot of them. So I think that is something that we can research about in India. That is not there. And secondly, Tanuja mentioned about something related to female athlete triad related wearables. So I wanted to know a little bit more about that. Yeah, that's. And yes, lastly, from the nutritionist's point of view, I think the wearables do help us because the resting heart rate, the lactate, and even so basically these 2 points actually make us understand the dehydration is there or not, or how is the recovery happening. So I think it's more of staying in touch with the other team members also along with the athlete. Then I think the variable would actually make more sense.
So regarding the female triad, if you see PCOD, PCOS, they act in both ways. There is weight gain and weight loss as well. So most of the athletes which I have worked with, we see a lot of cases where the weight drops down. So in a month's time, there's 4 kg loss, or there's gradual drop. And if you see athletes, they are more determined. They know what to do. They follow things. It's not that they don't. The problem comes is where we fail to understand. You often see coaches blaming कि ये क्या time pass करने के लिए है. Whereas athletes don't come for that. They dedicate their 8 hours, 9 hours of the day for so many years for just building the skills up. So as coaches, we need to understand how much to push them there and how much to not. So wearable devices, if you ask me, we can track the menstrual cycles, where whether there is ovulation happening, what is exactly the hormonal changes which are happening, and that data itself.
Is it there or as an
Aura has it.
Okay.
Yes, there are. So the apps exist. There are technologies which exist. If you go out of India, you will find in every single sport there is a specialized technology which is being used. So like for pole vault, there's the poles which are being made, they're specialized, the carbon fiber what they use. In India, if you talk, it's very less right now because sports science is still developing. We hardly have like 4-5 colleges in India related to sports science. So that is where we are. It's a big leap, but yes, we are developing on that. We have got IITians who are working on the apps, who are trying to make it cheaper for the athletes. At elite level, yes, they can afford everything, but that's like 1% or 2% of our athletes. Most of the athletes in the age of 19 to 23, we end up losing 75 to 80% of our athletes, who actually, when you can just track them there, you can monitor them, they could be a future medalist. So this is what India is struggling right now, where you get that younger generation, you preach them, teach them things, because they are uneducated in these things. I'm not saying the education part where we go to schools and all of that, but on the other aspect of actually, the holistic approach. This is where we are heading, and slowly and gradually, as we progress, this is what will help us to grow from where we are right now.
I think that brings us to the end of this wonderful discussion. Thank you to the entire panel. Thank you to the audience. And I hope I did some justice as a moderator. Thank you very much.